Good morning. Well, it's morning here anyways. Hey there, I am Kelly Chess. I am a 911 dispatcher with Jefferson County 911 Communications in Kansas, and I was asked by the 911 Coordinating Council to make some frontline training for my fellow dispatchers. This says hungover, but I am not hungover. It's just the cup. So if you're here to watch a little demonstration from me that I made up with some good information, reference suicidal callers, first party generally. As we know, the second party callers, third party callers on suicidal subjects are fairly easy. You get your general who, what, where, when, and why type of information and you hang up. But it becomes a little bit sketchy on what to do when you get a 911 call from someone who says, I am going to kill myself. That kind of changes things a little bit. So first, I already introduced myself. So I did want to talk about the reason why I did this. So when I first started my career with 911 dispatching 14 years ago, there was no type of protocol set in place for how to take a 911 call from a first party caller, how to talk to them, and it happened to me. Like I'm talking like within the first year on the radio, it happened to me. And I'll just go ahead and into the story. We'll say his name was Bruce. And Bruce, when I answered 911, he said, I want to kill myself. And I was like I just completely got stuck. I didn't know what to say other than my general stuff. Okay, where are you? I'm not telling you that. Okay, plan B. Of course, my mapping isn't working at the time, 14 years ago. The mapping was like, oh, you're within, 2,000 meters of this cell phone. So I was pretty frustrated, to say the least. There was absolutely, again, no protocol set in place for me to fall on, to lean on, to look at, to practice, to memorize. So I really just flew by the seat of my pants on this call, and we did eventually we got to ping his cell phone. Of course, you could ping cell phones back then, and we did find him. The police did surround him for his own safety. I tried to tell him, just get out of the car. It's for your own safety. You haven't done anything wrong. And unfortunately, he did take his life while I was on the phone that day. And that call has stuck with me forever. And that's really kind of what prompted me to do this training and start teaching it. I've been to a few APCO conferences and have taught it twice now. So I was asked to do a video of it, the whole COVID thing and stuff. So plus it's always good to have on hand. So why suicide is important to me also is it runs a little bit personal in my life. When I was 7 years old, I remember waking up and I went out into the living room and I saw my mom lying on the couch. She was laying halfway off the couch and her feet were on the couch and she was asleep, what appeared to be asleep to me at 7, and she had drool and foam coming out of her mouth and she wouldn't wake up. I remember shaking her and I'm like, Mom, wake up, what's wrong? And panicked. Well, I didn't know it at the time, but I called 911 and I told them my mommy wouldn't wake up. I don't really remember too much of how the call went itself. I just know I was terrified and I thought my mom was dead and I didn't know why. So a couple days had passed after they came. The ambulance took her away. I went with my grandparents, and a couple of days later, my mom comes back to get me from my grandparents. And my mom is very open about her mental health, drug use, alcoholism, and things like that. Even at a very young age, she was very open with me about it. And she just flat out told me that she took a bunch of pills and she wanted to kill herself. Well, it was at that time that I realized what suicide was and what it meant to people and how serious of a thing this was. I today cannot fathom personally ever being that sad, ever. I've had my down moments. I've thought about what if, but I've never actually thought about the act of doing it. And so I have so much empathy, I really do, towards people who are that sad and feel like they are at the lowest point of their life, that they feel like they have to take their lives. So my mom also tried it again. She tried slicing her wrist. This time I found her under a pile, and when I say a pile, I mean a pile of clothes that probably was about 5 foot high. I couldn't find, I knew she was in a room. She was listening, to like sad music, and I'm like, Mom? So I just started digging through the clothes, and there she was with sliced wrist, crying. And man, I cannot tell you and I was 12 at that time, I can't tell you how that just sticks with you. So you put Bruce in with my mom and her mental health and her actual attempts. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I want a career in 911 dispatching. Yeah, not really considering, because in my mind, I thought there were like, suicide hotlines. Well, I didn't really think that a whole lot of suicidal people would be calling me, but it certainly does happen. It certainly does. So that is why I'm here. That's why I'm passionate about it. That's why I want to give some pointers to help you guys, the frontline 911 dispatchers, with some, just some key pointers and some things to take away from this. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. My presentation, you can't see it. I'm looking at it here. I don't know, and I haven't figured out how to do a screen share, so I apologize for that. It's first party suicidal callers. Let's talk about it. Why do we want to talk about it? Because a lot of times people are like, oh, suicide, shh, we can't talk about that. It might make them want to if we talk about it. It's not true. And so the first thing I want to go over is myths about suicide. The first myth is suicide peaks over the holidays. So given the hustle and bustle and stress so many people feel around the holidays, it may seem as no surprise the myth persists that suicides spike during the winter months. In fact, suicide does show some seasonal patterns, but peaks when they occur are actually in the spring, right now. And they say the spring seasonality pattern dates back to the 1800s. In 1995, a study of suicide rates around the world published in the journal Social Science and Medicine found that the Northern Hemisphere suicide spiked in the month of May. This affects the strongest in agricultural nations and in temperate climates where seasonal differences are more pronounced. And researchers aren't sure why these seasonal patterns exist, but a leading theory holds that social life becomes more intense in the warmer months, putting extra stressors on people who are struggling with mental health. So being a 911 dispatcher for 14 years now, like I said, I have noticed an increase all around me, not just as a 911 dispatcher, but all around me. I'm raising 2 teenage daughters. They are riddled with anxiety. My coworkers, anxiety. Me, anxiety. My callers, anxiety. It has grown. Anxiety, PTSD, stress. I don't know what it is. I don't know what's going on, but right now there is so much of it. Now, some people find healthy outlets, eating right, whatever, exercising, talking about it, therapy, reading, listening to blogs about mental health and stuff like that. And then there are some who just don't know how to get out of that spot. So sad. Another myth is putting ideas in people's heads. So like I had said before getting into the myths, when someone seems depressed, their loved ones may fear asking if they're having suicidal thoughts, worrying it will actually trigger them to follow through. This is not the case, however. Mental health professionals say that if you're worried about someone, the best thing to do is to talk openly about it. And that's why my presentation is called Let's Talk About It, because we need to get rid of that stigma. It needs to be talked about. People need to be aware of it, and they need to know a little bit more about it. A lot of people don't understand it. So talking about it, as hard as it is, may help that person break the tension and secrecy that feeds into suicidal behavior. And above all, talking helps that person get help. Okay, that's not saying that some do call for attention, or like they're going through a bad breakup. They've never been suicidal before, but in order to get to their ex or soon to be ex, they call 911. I want to kill myself. Everyone shows up, lights and sirens, and they never do it again. That's totally different. I'm talking about the real situations here. Another myth, suicidal talk is just attention seeking. Oh, like I was just saying, it's almost like I've done this presentation before. So again, not true. Talking about dying or harming oneself is one of the major warning signs of a suicide attempt. Not everyone who wants to commit suicide will signal their intentions, of course, but just because someone is talking about suicide does mean they are somehow safe. I'm sorry, I took a sip of coffee and my throat just farted. We're fine. We're gonna move on. We're gonna act like that never happened. Most people leave a note. Upon hearing that someone has committed suicide, the immediate question is, did they leave a note? The idea that note writing is a key part of the suicide process makes sense to the non-suicidal mind, like mine. However, in actuality, studies find rates of note leaving between 0 and 40%. So it usually leaves family and friends and loved ones with some questions as to why, or all of a sudden it may come to you as the friend or family member going, geez, I should have seen the signs earlier. Suicide is inevitable. Many people believe that a suicidal person will find a way to die no matter what. This argument is used by those opposed to suicide barriers on the Golden Gate Bridge, for example. More than 90% of people who commit suicide have diagnosable mental health problems, and the act of is very often the response of a stressed out, troubled person to a momentary crisis. So I'm going to repeat that sentence, and I want you to listen very closely. The act of actually committing suicide is often the response of a stressed out, troubled person to a momentary crisis. So something led up to that point for them to call, right? As a 911 dispatcher. So as a 911 dispatcher, how important is that statement to you? You have the capability with some skills, with some verbiage, with some type of plan set in place to keep this person safe until law enforcement, EMS can get there and get this person help. How huge is that? I mean, wouldn't you want some extra pointers on that? Me too. People who attempt suicide and survive will not attempt suicide again. False. Chances are they will attempt. And sadly, if they continue to attempt, it will probably follow through someday. Another one, this is so sad. Young people never think about suicide. They have their entire life ahead of them. Suicide is the third leading cause in our teenagers today. So we went over some myths. Let's go over some quick facts. Suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the United States. In 2017, almost 48,000 people died by suicide in 1 year. 48,000. In that same year, over 1 million attempts were made. 1 million suicide attempts were made. Yeah. The rate of suicide is highest in middle-aged white men, and men die by suicide 3.54 times more than women, and on average, there are 129 suicide deaths in the U.S. every single day. A day. 129. Now, these numbers are back from 2017, so it's probably upped a little bit. I'm going to be honest, with everything going on, the civil unrest in the United States, COVID, all that stuff, plus mental health has been on the rise this entire time, and people are finding it harder and harder to seek help, unfortunately. So what are some warning signs? Research indicates a number of risk factors for suicide. Some of these common signs to look for are verbal suicide threats. I'm going to kill myself. You'd be better off without me. Maybe I should just not be around. People will start to give expressions of hopelessness. Previous suicide attempts, that's a given. Daring or risk-taking behavior. Like, I don't care, YOLO, I'm going to drive 120 miles per hour drunk on a two-way highway and just see what happens, and that kind of stuff. Personality changes, like you haven't been yourself. Is something going on or what? Obvious depression. Now that one's hard to pick out because sometimes people in general, even healthy people, will have some highs and they'll have some lows. We go through this little of life, right? So depression it's pretty vague. Giving away prized possessions. That's someone who's probably pretty serious when you're giving away your 57 Cadillac or your coin collection, or you start writing out a will, to who gets what type of scenario. So those are some warning signs. In my presentation, I actually have a video of Kevin Gates. I can't play it, but you're more than welcome to get on YouTube, search Kevin Gates, and watch that video that he has out there. He tells a story. It's a BuzzFeed video. He tells a story how he felt. He was going through a lot of mental problems. In fact, he was diagnosed later on after he attempted by jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. And so that's what the story is about. And he remembers in the video, he says, I remember so clearly that I was on the bridge. I'm crying. It's obvious I'm very distraught and there's something going on. And this tourist lady comes up to me, not knowing any better. And she says, will you take a picture of me on the Golden Gate Bridge? And he goes, it was in that moment that I knew I didn't matter. And that piece of that video sticks with me because as a 911 dispatcher, if they call and they're obviously want some help, they just called 911, right? And they say, I want to kill myself. The last thing we want to do is to make them feel like no one cares. Like that's it. I just don't ever want to make someone feel that way. The lady didn't know. It's not her fault. And he even says that in the video. It's not her fault. She didn't know. But it was the straw that broke the camel's back for him. So little ending on that. Obviously, Kevin lives through his attempt and he is able to tell his story on video. So, all right. So let's say you get a 911 call. The very first thing is you want to start building a rapport and labeling emotions with your caller. And that's going to be your number one focus as a 911 call taker. Using active listening and being empathetic are key for building that trust or the rapport. So you want to first label your emotions. You sound upset. You sound distraught. You seem like you're at your wit's end. I hear complete sadness in your voice. And you also want to try to try and use different words and not just like sad, mad, glad, that kind of stuff. Try to really pinpoint and dig deep within yourself. This is where you find your empathy, is when you dig deep in here and go, man, he really sounds like he is just heartbroken. You sound heartbroken right now. And I'm trying to understand and I want to help you. You're going to have to really practice with some words and stuff. And it's harder than you think, really. Active listening, ask open-ended questions, not yes or no questions, right? I mean, we're all adults here. We're 911 dispatchers. So we know what open-ended questions are. Repeat the caller's last statement. Like a good example of that would be, I just feel like if I were gone, no one would miss me. So what you're saying is that if you killed yourself, you don't think anyone would miss you? So you can kind of mix the words up, but let me, but spit the verbiage right back at them, because then they're hearing themselves go, wait a minute. Yeah, that's what I said. When you're talking to them, use I messages. If you're saying you this, you that, you need to put the gun down, you seem like this, you seem like that, they get very defensive. They're already, the last thing they need is for you to be like, you. So be sure to try your best at using I messages. Use effective pauses. What does effective pauses mean? Give them a chance to talk. As 911 dispatchers, we get on this, and it's what we need to do. You got to get a hold of your caller, right? You need to take control of the situation. You need to be the one asking the questions, controlling where your call goes. Well, with 911 first party suicidal callers, allow those moments to just set and let the person talk. You should already have help en route. So this is really just letting them vent. This is keeping them from harming themselves because they're talking. This is keeping their mind occupied. So it's really, effective pauses are very effective. Hence, okay, anyways, we're going to move on. Summarize what was said by the suicidal caller and repeat. Try to avoid, really, yeah, okay. Using words like that isn't very compassionate. So I understand. I'm trying to understand. I'm really trying to get it, but we're going to get you some help. So, those kind of phrases, providing reassurance, but also letting them know that you're still listening to them. Be empathetic, non-judgmental, and open-minded. This isn't your life. These aren't your shoes that you're walking in. This isn't your mental health on the other end of the line. You are merely a stepping stone to this person getting help, right? So just be open-minded, be empathetic with them, and carry on a conversation with someone who's hurting. Maybe go back in a time where you felt hurt or abandonment or sadness, and really try to empathize with your caller and know what they're going through. You want to use a calming tone of voice, understanding and soft, and listen to understand and not to respond. How many times has that helped you out in just general relationships anywhere? Listen to understand and not to respond. This place would be a different place if we all followed that rule. Some questions to ask your caller. These are really good. Are you going to commit suicide? As blunt as that sounds, it's good. And you know why? I mean, it is a yes or no question, but it usually sparks, yeah, and this is why, and they will spill the beans. Do you have a plan for committing suicide? That's always good. It'll also keep them in tune and on the call. And what are you planning to do? How are you planning to take your life? How long have you been planning this? How long have you been feeling this way? Have you ever thought about killing yourself before? Yes? When? What stopped you? Have you ever tried to kill yourself before? What happened? Have you been drinking or using drugs? That one may be a little, just kind of get a feel for your caller on that. And can you describe how you have played this out in your head? So these right here are really good questions to start out with. They're basic, but they're straightforward, and it'll keep your caller. And here's the thing, as a 911 dispatcher, these questions, hopefully, okay, will keep your caller on the line and safe until help gets there. And that's really your job, right? I want to talk to you. I want to try and understand you and be here for you and listen to your story. And then when help arrives, I'm going to disconnect. I'm probably going to go outside and, walk it off, because these calls are not easy for anyone, really. But that is your job as a 911 dispatcher. How can I keep you safe until help gets there? Asking these questions, these open-ended questions, being empathetic and trying to learn. That's what's going to keep your caller safe. So you want to focus on the specific situation that caused the person to feel suicidal. My wife left me of 23 years. My dad has terminal cancer, and he had terminal cancer. He killed himself, and he was the only thing I had left in my life. Now I want to die. Whatever their situation is, they usually tell you their breaking point when they call 911. You pretty much know something happened that led up to them calling. So you want to talk openly about the finality of death. You do realize that if you took your life, there's no coming back from that. This isn't a video game where you get 3 lives, 3 chances. Be open about it. Let them know that if you take your life, that's it. Identify what is meaningful to the caller, and then these are your hooks. You got to dig your hooks in there. So what are hooks? For a lot of people, it's family. Their family. Their pets. It could be their career. I just got fired today. FML. Right? No. That's not the answer. There's other jobs out there, dude. You could be a 911 dispatcher. We're always short-staffed. And you can help others who suffer like you. Kids. Parents, siblings, friends, your spouse or your significant other, or your possessions. So those are your hooks. Those are the things you want to say, well, and I'll give some examples here. If you killed yourself, who would take care of so-and-so? Let's say their kids, or foster kids, or who would take care of their pet? What about the hardships your loved ones will go through? What about your morals and religious and ethical reservations? Now, if this is someone who's already mentioned, God and this, that, and the other, then their religion may be their hook. Play on that. Keep them safe and play on it. How do you think your mother or father will deal with the fact that you killed yourself? This is a good one for teenagers or younger kids. If you killed yourself, you will never see so-and-so grow up, graduate, get married, or have kids. You've told me you've made some pretty important breakthroughs in your job. If you killed yourself, you'll never have that satisfaction again. That's talking about the finality of death. You were telling me about your hobby, whatever their hobby may be. I'm just using this as an example. You're pretty proud of your hobby. What will happen to that if you die? And what about, I don't know, your pet, Bobo? Who will take care of Bobo if you die? We all know how much Bobo means to you. Once you're dead, you're not going to get another chance. If you killed yourself to get back at so-and-so, all that's going to happen is that you'll be dead, and we can't be sure of so-and-so's reaction. So-and-so may not care at all. So-and-so wins. You're dead, and so-and-so gets to go on living their life. These may sound harsh, but it really is a breakthrough. Possibly, it could be a breakthrough in that moment to be like, you know what? You're right. There might just be that little bit, excuse me. Sorry about that. Not everyone who attempts to kill themselves dies. You could end up in worse shape, paralyzed, or in severe pain. Kevin Gates' story. What do you want to have happen? What would need to happen for you to feel better, feel like you could go on? So here we go. Now we're asking questions to be like, what can we do for you? What are some things that you could do for yourself? If you were like this depressed before, and you were about to take your life, what saved you then so that you could go through this with me now? What helped you back then? That's a hook too. And what do you think you could do that would not make it hurt so much? What has worked in the past? I just said that, so sorry about that redundancy. When an attempt has been made, it is important to recognize the medical needs at that part. Okay, so as a 911 dispatcher where I work, we have EMD, Pro QA. If someone calls in and says, Well, yeah, we've actually had this. I just tried to shoot myself in the head. I missed and I hit my shoulder. So you'll want to go with gunshot, and then and then talk about the mental health aspect of it after you've assessed the injuries. Same with people who have attempted to who have sliced their wrist before calling, gunshot wounds, hanging. There's numerous stuff. Overdose with pills, chemical suicide. You may have heard of that as well. That's actually on a part of my training, but we won't be going into that today. So it is important, if you don't have a policy put in place yet, it is important that when an attempt has been made that you do recognize the medical needs at that point first, right? Does your PSAP have a suicidal caller protocol in place? And our dispatch center we move straight to ProQA after the address and phone number have been verified if they've made an attempt. If they have not made an attempt and they're just threatening suicide verbally, we do not do ProQA. You could, but in my opinion, when you do ProQA with a first party caller who has not made an attempt, it's so robotic and generic questioning that you just cannot build the rapport. And when I tell you that you need to build a rapport as a 911 dispatcher, it is very important with 911 suicidal callers that you build that conversation, that friendship, that trust, so that when your officers arrive on scene, not only is your caller hopefully in a safer, better place mentally, but your officers will also be in a safer place, pulling up on scene. If there was a weapon involved, where's the weapon now? Have we talked the subject literally off the ledge? And always keep your officers updated on where you're at in your call process. It's very, very, very important. Unfortunately, there are some people, there is no talking to, there is no getting to. There are some that call, and when they say, I want to die, I'm going to kill myself, they will do it. And do not, and promise me right now, do not ever hold that accountability to you. That is their mental health. That is their life. That was their decision. And there was probably nothing that you could have done to change that outcome. So never, ever, ever hold that in your heart and take the blame for someone who takes their own life. Look, from me, okay, I had to deal with it too, with the story of Bruce. And it was an eye-opener for me. And it was a sad thing. I had to work through it. But I also felt that we needed change in our department. And that's the whole reason why I teach this thing on first party suicidal callers. I feel like maybe if I had a little bit more information to back me, then I may not have felt like it was